up there. And we have a booth as well if you want to meet some companies which have been supported through the Energy Catalyst scheme. And I also help run a program called Zero Emissions Generators, which is specifically looking at renewable replacements for diesel and petrol generators. In terms of background for myself, I'm a chemist by training. Spent some time in startups, and then worked for Dyson for a while, and then moved into research funding before joining Innovate UK. So quite a broad background. But yeah, very happy to be here.
So, hello everyone. My name is Olubemini Idowu. So I have experience on the industry side. I have about 10 years experience working on the industry side of renewable energy. So I've worked with gas stations, and also I have a bit of experience in the telecoms industry. So most of my discussion today here will be about how the industry perceives distributed renewable energy and how we can better use it in the industry. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Zainab Masmoudi, financial analyst representing today Solar 23 GmbH. We are a German pioneer in the solar energy, operating now for 24 years in the African continent. And we operate mainly in two different business units. One is as an EPC, and so we deliver our turnkey solutions to our clients. And the second one is as a business developer now. And yeah, looking forward to exploring the session further with you.
Hi everybody, so I'm the founder of RARES, so it's a solar company that was created in Benin now more than 12 years ago. So we are addressing different segments of the market, so the SHS, the PUE, so all the access for energy for like small kit but for productive use, mini CNI, and also we cover today mini grids. So we are doing the EPC, the development, or plus the co-development and the operation on 20 years. And today we are based in West Africa, so Benin, Burkina Faso, Togo, Niger, Senegal, and also we are opening a new country with GDS in DRC.
Thanks very much. And I realize in my enthusiasm to jump into the discussion, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Nico Tyabji with Mirova SunFunder. We provide debt financing solutions really across these different kinds of segments. Also jumping straight in, Paul, maybe I'll start with you. And you described the range of the sectors that you're offering solutions to. Can you tell us a bit about where you see traction for these kind of solutions? And some of the challenges in signing those clients.
How we see today the market is like, so few years, when we start 10 years ago, the market was mostly for people who have money to buy like an energy solution, to buy a solar systems to avoid the shutdown from the grid, so it was more for people who have a lot of money. So that's what at the beginning. Then there will be like the pay-as-you-go trend, and everybody jump into these models with small kits. And now I would say that the market is more going to the pay-as-you-go on bigger systems. So that's why on our side, we already have this experience of big systems. We also have the experience on pay-as-you-go. And now we see it to small CNI, and I would say mini grid is the same. It's like you have a big asset that you have to manage during 20 years.
And what about the prospects for signing those kind of clients? What are the kind of cases that you need to make to them?
So on the CNI, there is many different type of actors. This means that it's almost like every company could have like a CNI solution on their roof. The only, I would say, question for the end users is more how much is the part of energy in my spending and my OPEX every day. And that's how we can say, okay, you are priority for the CNI compared to others. But I would say today that every companies in Africa, but also in the world, could have this interest for CNI installation on their roof. And for example, in the client we can address today, you can have like a mill, so tout ce qui est autour de la farine, but you can also for like the transport, you can for the transformation of product, of food, of any kind of client.
It's great to hear there's broad applicability, and you're seeing that coming through. Remy, I want to come to you because you've worked in a couple of very specific areas, I think, notably a couple of industry verticals where solarization can make a lot of sense. Can you kind of tell us what you're seeing in Nigeria for the rollout of those solutions?
Okay, so on the industry side, I have seen the impact on the business, the impact of having solar on the business. And for most of the projects that I have worked on, they've been projects where you have provided solar for a particular facility, right? And on the large scale, the impacts have been more energy availability, more reliability. So if you have solar, if you have an off-grid installation with backup batteries and solar installations, you see that your power, you have more power, and your power is more available and you can use it when you need it. Another thing is in terms of environment, air pollution and noise pollution. These diesel gens, they are very noisy, and most of the industries that I have had the chance to work with are located in areas close to residential areas. So you find that when you make the switch, the people around you, not only your business feels the impact, but the environment around you, they feel the impact, and they are even very thankful to say, okay, before we had this noise and we had this, everywhere was always smelling of diesel, you had pollution of the soil, you had pollution in the air, but switching to these renewable energy sources really makes the difference. Another impact is actually in terms of job creation and in terms of manpower development. When in my projects, when we started, to get that manpower, we had to train people, and at the end of the day, we have seen some of the people that I have worked with and have trained, they have established their companies because they had the capacity we did some capacity building, to train the people, to upskill them, to be able to deploy these solutions.
Yeah, so at the kind of community level as well as the cost savings of the companies, there's clear benefits. Maybe one thing to just bring out, if we can, is that, I think the verticals you've been working with are typically kind of larger conglomerates, international companies. What's your experience of the decision-making processes within those kind of verticals? What kind of cases need to be made?
So globally, there's a push for all companies to be more sustainable, right? So if maybe 10 years ago, it was a bit difficult to convince management to put down their money and go into renewable energy solutions, by the time you look at your sustainability report and the amount of emissions that your business is putting in the air, then you making your investment pitch, you telling them, okay, we need to do this. By the time they do the analysis, they not only analyze the NPV and the IRR, they also have to look at the environmental benefits. So right now it's easier because we have like the COPs that have gone up, and every country and every continent right now has targets to meet. So it's easier to get businesses to put their money on the table right now than it was before.
Thank you. Well, Zainab, I believe that you're working with maybe smaller, still large businesses, but less at the kind of international scale. So how have you found getting the adoption of these kind of solutions for different industries, and which industries in particular have you seen traction in?
Yeah. So we have actually as an international energy company worked with over 80 different countries from partners and clients, etc. We work with different clients, either private sector and companies, governmental agencies and ministries, and also NGOs. So all of this has led us to cooperate in different industries and have access and impact in different sectors and industries, which really allows us to tailor, I would say, our projects according to specific needs, according to the region and the industry, etc. And for instance, just to name a few, I would name the energy, the health sector, for example, so the industry of medical equipment or health centers, and we have electrified over 400 health centers, and we also worked on as an industry in other industrial impact in through providing pumping systems, for instance, in Togo, for different industrial activities such as fishing or specific activities in these areas, and also for we had a project in Nigeria of providing pumping systems and water tanks for over 21 modern gardens, and all of this has allowed, has enabled us to like I said, tailor our solutions according to this specific industry. And I would say that the approach to doing this tailoring is through focusing on different elements. For instance, it's very important to have a data-focused approach, and we ensure that for each project and for each industry, you are on site, you have access to the local circumstances, either through travels, through our local network of partners. It's very important to have accurate data and not just theoretical elements or information, but to have access to this real information from the communities, from the clients, and so on. And the second element would be also the importance of the expertise and the experience of, for instance, our team, because we have technical expertise working with us with over 35 years of experience. This is very important because it allows us to tailor the solution to the specific need of the industry. And an important factor contributing to this expertise is also benefiting from the lessons learned of all of our projects, and this we do through monitoring of previous projects, follow-ups, etc., and also through participation in the conversation, so through conferences, through those important discussions which allow us to have more exposure to the specific needs of industries, of other stakeholders, of energy actors, and so on also. And of course, to be always informed and either for technologies, innovations, and so on, and to have the customized, of course, solution and financing for that specific needs. And all of this would lead us to having this fit for the exact industrial, I would say maybe that is country specific, also that is region specific and industry specific, not just and convenient with the activities of the communities and to the solutions provided for DRE. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, James, I mean, maybe building on tailoring, but in kind of new areas of innovation, with Catalyst and your work, are you seeing kind of new innovations that can apply to these industrial solutions?
Absolutely. So just as a little bit of background, we in effect provide innovation funding. So we're almost a step before a lot of these businesses, before they scale, if you want to kind of prove a pilot scale or even feasibility studies, and then be able to get kind of debt financing post our support. That's kind of where we come in. So in terms of novel solutions, yes, that's the It's the whole point of the schemes that we run. So to be able to apply for energy catalyst funding, it needs to be innovative, it needs to be clean energy, and it needs to benefit the country in which you're doing a project in. So we have a massive portfolio of projects. I think last count, we had a total of about 400 projects that we've supported in total, and I think we're at about 120 live projects right now. Both Nigeria and Kenya are our biggest kind of nations in terms of where our projects work. But there's definitely been a push from us more recently to the Indo-Pacific region and the Pacific Islands as well, mainly because we work with the UK aid budget, so we can basically apply that not just in Africa, but also in Indo-Pacific region and South Asia. So there's a real push towards those regions, which require very different innovations and approaches as well. So in terms of some of the cool stuff that we've seen, we have everything from novel generation technologies. I would say that often the most successes that we get from projects is where they've got a really strong use case. So we do see quite a few businesses who do B2C type stuff. They work with lots of customers. But we do see a lot of very strong projects which are specifically focused on a particular industry. So, for example, kind of dairy farming, that sort of stuff. Or then we had a project in the Philippines which was specifically looking at cooling for fish, for fishermen. Which basically, as soon as you're able to provide cooling, you can extend out the lifetime, and it means you can sell much further on into the future. So there's real benefit to that as well. Just kind of building on a couple of the points that have already been spoken about, I definitely want to echo a lot of the points that have been made around data being the one thing, and also specific making schemes which are specific to particular regions. So I've spoken a lot about Energy Catalyst, but we also have a new program called Zero Emissions Generators, or ZGen. So that takes the particular issue of fossil fuel based generators, kind of the smaller scale ones, and aims to target them with renewable alternatives. So that's a specific kind of issue we're targeting, but also only in Nigeria and the Philippines, at least for the accelerator projects. So we're looking at two very particular areas with their own particular challenges. So that kind of specificity of support, I think, is really, really key as well.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe just building on that then, the idea of specificity and particular regions. Thinking about it from the policy side, the regulatory side, you've all said that there's a huge amount of potential here. It applies across sectors. We can tailor the solutions. Technically, it's all possible. What are the kind of policy drivers and frameworks that have been important to seeing markets grow? And are there any places in particular we should be looking at, to take some of those policy tools for more broadly in the region?
The question is for me. No, yeah. For the CNI, the first difficulties is the regulatory. For example, I think a lot of company, and I think Solar 23 too, goes to Senegal because they think it will be the market for the CNI and self-consumption and so on, because the state will change the law to enable that. But everybody wait, and now all the companies are leaving the country because it's not possible to do it. So we can see with this example that it's complicated as the private developers, because it's a lot of time, a lot of risk, and a lot of cost when the regulatory framework is not ready. And every country has a different regulatory framework, which is very complicated. So that's very complicated for CNI developer for that. But I would say it's not the only difficulties to develop CNI. There is also other difficulties. For example, just to find the clients is sometimes complicated, because you also have companies that you have local decision. So you can see it's a local company, you can see maybe the CEO. But if it's international company, then you never saw the people who are in charge of the decision locally. So sometimes you have the team, we have that our team are discussing with the the companies and so on, but the decision will be made, for example, in UK and so on. So sometimes they say, oh yeah, we will install solar system, we tell you when. No, we already told you that it has been decided and that's what is planned. So there is these difficulties, and also you have different type of client, people who know and understand and want solar, I would say, and other clients who doesn't care. And for us, it's like something very far. So you have to explain them what is solar, what can it bring to them, and so on, which take a lot of time. And then after that, you can, if the company is interesting, they can say, okay, now we can go in the technical things. And the technical things, I mean, we can do it by two ways. You can do it like, we could do it like quickly, but if we want to do the things good, then normally you should see if the structure of the buildings is enough strong to have the solar on it. And what we see today is when we do the studies, we say, but the building even should have been down, cannot even without panels, cannot work. And it's the same in France, in Europe. So that's the second issue. And then you have all this issue on the technical, where I could put the panels, where is the electrical installation okay, because sometimes you have like the electrical installation is very, it's very poor, so you cannot put your solar installation on it. So with that, it's a lot of technical issue that you can have. Then you have the financial issue that everybody knows, but it's not, I would say, not the rate the issue. It's more that you can have the financial, and in how long. If it's take two years, I mean, tell that to someone who owns the company, say, okay, I have to do due diligence documents for 2 years for just that, and we say no, that's another thing. And then for the operation, we can say, okay, it's easy now, everything is finalized, but during the operation, you have also to explain to the client how it's working, why, and so on, because STEM is something that is new for people, and then you have to train them, and you have to also explain what they win at the end, because sometimes it's also complicated when you say, okay, you will win maybe 100 naira per month, but at the end you say, okay, but I pay still 100 naira per month. But you say, yeah, but you increase your consumption. Yeah, but no, you told me that you will decrease my bill, and I have the same one. So you have to take time to explain them and so on. And most of the clients, lots of our clients, what they want, and they want to left the grid. So sometimes for them, at the end, they would say, I want to pay zero. It's not I want to reduce my invoice, I want to pay zero. And so for us, it's complicated, because then you have like the price of the installation is very expensive. So you say, no, it's too expensive. So you try to make a compromise, but if the client do not really understood, then at the end you say, well, you told me that I will reduce my invoice, but it's not. So there is a lot of issue at every level, and sometimes you can be stopped at one level, and then you lost all the money you invest with the client. So to develop a portfolio of CNI is very costly and complicated. I think it's also something that I would slow down the CNI impulsion. And it could be done, for example, an idea that like public solution that can finance companies say, okay, I will do like an energy analysis, and like this, I could look like a micro tender, but as a company, I do a micro tender like this. Even for the company, it's just not one developer who come with his offer. He has the data, and like this, he can propose that, and you can have the best solution for the company. And you are not like, as a company, you will push for your solution, but maybe for the client is not the best one. You can find competitors from you, but all the work you have done, it would be lost. So it's challenges we are facing today.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that on like the regulatory and policy side, I think what's really required is basically policy and regulation, which really sets what the future wants to look like for that nation. So this is something that we've faced in the UK a couple of times, where there were a couple of very clear targets. For example, phasing out of internal combustion engines by 2030. So no new ICE cars in the UK from 2030. The government then pushed that back by 5 years. And from speaking to people working, ooh.
We'll see if the lights come back. And in the meantime, the lights have come back. How about the mics?
There you go. And we're back.
If only we had C&I.
Yeah, exactly. So those targets got pushed back by 5 years, and having spoken to a couple of the EV and car companies in the UK, having good to find endpoint, even if it's quite soon, was really attractive. And actually moving deadlines and flip-flopping and changing policies and pushing stuff back is not attractive for businesses, because you want a clear kind of path to say, oh, that's an attractive market to go into, because I know there are these clear targets to reach. So that would be my kind of general take on policy, of really setting the what the process should look like, and having really clear aims as a nation of what you want to look like in terms of an energy sector.
Okay, and just to add to that, there's a place for policies, and then there's a place for enabling environment and ensuring that your country or your system is not working in a way that is counterproductive to the policies. I think Nigeria has the renewable energy policy that wants to make the contribution of renewable energy to be 25%, but there was some back and forth a few years ago where the customs duty on solar panels was set to be 0%, and then at the point of importation of the solar panels, the customs said that 0% is only for solar panels that don't have the converters behind them. So at the end of the day, if I had money if I was interested in this business, if there are no enabling paths to make deploying these solutions easier, then your policies are not your operations and the things that you are doing are not working in line to achieve these goals and follow the policies that have been set.
Yeah, I hear you on almost the enabling environment making sure it doesn't get in the way of getting on with these solutions. I mean, you've all described them as quite fundamentally driven by the economics and the broader kind of environmental goals of the companies and this kind of stuff. But Paul, you brought up a lot of the bottlenecks that you face in actually getting these projects signed, whether it's the decision-making processes of the companies, or even their capacity to adopt these solutions, be it their factory roof falling down or otherwise. And I'm curious, for the others, did those bottlenecks resonate? Were there others that you see there as well for stopping these solutions where the fundamentals seem very good from actually being adopted?
Yeah, I guess just briefly on that. I mean, we've had a project recently in South Africa where a storm blew in and blew half the solar panels off the roof. So they survived. Turned out it had to be re-put on, but it's things like that where the actual implementation of them really needs to be thought about. Again, on the imports thing, we hear from so many projects about this, about being a solar cell being charged as like a luxury good when it's coming into the country, and you get slapped with this massive tax. And I mean, we were talking about this earlier, where you like to think kind of innovation is going to be able to solve everything, but it's actually a lot of the practical work of logistics, supply chain in country, O&M, training, which can actually really stifle things. So we have supported a few businesses who do put that kind of training and O&M to central to their business models, where they see potential future employees. So there's a real drive from them to do a lot of training around solar cell maintenance, basic electronics, that sort of stuff, because they're thinking about the next generation of electronic engineers who they can then hire and grow their business locally. So that's something which is often missed out of. It's not just installing it, it's how long can you kind of leave it and make sure that it kind of works for as well. We're talking about systems that we want to last for decades, and that's not always the case.
Absolutely. And on the people side, I mean, in the end, these are solutions that are installed by people, and ultimately relies on people. And Bemi, we were talking before, and you were mentioning in Nigeria, you've kind of seen very specific cases of this with the workforce for the kind of solutions that you've been looking at.
Yes, so over my 10 years of experience working with the installers and installations, there is a big gap in terms of quality of the installations. And for me, a point that I have identified is that there's a standard, there's a Nigerian standard for engineers, there's a Nigerian Society of Engineers, right? But there are no driven policies and there are no driven frameworks and there's no targeted trainings and accreditation and things that you have and things that have been put in place to ensure that, okay, if I want a solar installer, what certification do I have to look for in a Nigerian to ensure that my installation is of quality? You can get, they will tell you to meet an electrical engineer, but are all electrical engineers trained for that? Not, it's not very likely. So for me, I think that another thing that we need to look at as a country is putting in steps, putting in training facilities and putting in accreditations and things that people need to, and things that would ensure that whoever we reach out to carry out our installations gives us quality, giving the people the training. So like I said, when I was doing my project, I had to be involved in training the manpower directly. How many people can I myself train? If it would have been easier and it would be faster if there's a body or if there's a certification, if our training and gives there's a technical college. If the technical colleges have a certification, solar installer certification, right, that is accredited and that is in the education system, that when you meet somebody with this certificate, you know that they will do a good job for you. And another thing is, we had this discussion yesterday as well. The language of instruction in Nigeria is English, but not everybody understands and is able to translate that English to their day-to-day language. It's a general problem in the country. It's something that we cannot shy away from. So we need to think up ways to, maybe change, maybe translate these instructions and translate these processes and best ways to work to local languages, to pidgin English, to ensure that people can be taught, the people that are taught understand what they are supposed to do and break it down in the simplest ways. To do concrete works, for example, you can break it down in a way that is simple for anybody off the streets, that's what you would find as a secondary school graduate can easily learn. The person can get the certification, and for every time that work is done, you are assured that the work is going to be well done.
Paul, Zainab, I wonder if you have perspectives on that as well in terms of your workforce and ensuring the quality of your installations.
Yeah, mainly what I would comment is that you can see that there are some efforts in many countries to make those policies maybe a bit easier, I would say, especially countries that really want to endorse like green transition and renewable energy projects. And but it's still like a very, I would say, long way to go. I would name, for example, the situation, for example, our development project in Zambia. So we've been in a lot of processes for regulations, policies, and so on, and a lot of contact with that aspect. So yes, there are some, I would say, maybe incentives, some ways to facilitate the investment for interested investors. It might be a long process sometimes to have, for example, different permits, or to have to request some even for starting up companies, to request, for example, some yearly payments or like licenses or so on. That might be a challenge for new developers, I would say, or for new starting companies, which is in this context of more of facilitating more and providing more incentives through policies, regulations, and so on, to make it easier actually for those investments to be made. Because with all the challenges mentioned, it would be a very nice contribution from the countries to actually attract more projects and
build it as part of the domestic economy as well. Yeah. Great. Well, look, I think one other aspect I'd love to touch on is the kind of the broader applicability of these kind of projects. So very curious for any reflections. I mean, firstly, energy access for industrials is one thing, but these days we're also talking a lot about energy access for people. So do you see scope for using these kind of installations as anchor clients for mini grids, and whether it's on a telco tower or a factory? And then secondly, how about when the grid arrives? And are there things that you need to design into these projects to be ready for the way that the grid system develops as well?
I guess just initially to kind of start off, again, with a lot of the highly successful projects that we have, there is a particular use case, which means there's a way of making money, if that makes sense, from maybe just one client, be it through a factory, a textile mill, a farm, something like that. But what we do see is, say, when like the microgrid is installed, a lot of houses might kind of crop up around because there's access to energy nearby. So there's definitely having that use case, and as you said, like an anchor client, really does bring kind of a community together, which grows as well around that access to energy. We see this particularly, for example, in a lot of the island nations that we support as well, like trying to decarbonize islands, where, as you can imagine, the easiest way to provide energy is often to roll in a diesel or petrol generator to power islands. But if you can do that through a sustainable route instead, and kind of provide ownership to the people who live there as well, so they feel capable to maintain it and own it as well, then I think that kind of change of model really creates longevity in these projects.
Does anyone else want to come in on the idea of mini grids building around industrial facilities?
Yes, so I have spoken to a few mini grid developers over the past 2 days, and what I would say is there has to be a bigger collaboration between the mini grid developers and the industries, because, like you mentioned, it's a big opportunity if they can find industrial customers that they will use as anchor clients, and clients that would assure them of some form of revenue. So when you are looking for where to site your mini grid, if you can find maybe a small factory, a telecom site, a gas station, somewhere where you know that they would definitely always need that power supply, they will need that electricity, then if you build your mini grid there, even though, residential, sometimes they can decide that, okay, they don't have any money, they're not going to pay anymore, or most residentials will only use what they can afford to use. But for factories and for industries and for business commercial clients, you are more assured of your revenue. And you mentioned in the eventuality that the grid comes in an off-grid system, you have to use a lot of batteries, right? When the grid comes in, it makes better business case. So you are able to reduce your capex, your running capex. So replacement capex, right? So maybe eventually you don't have to replace your batteries as often, or you don't have to replace as many batteries. Also, hopefully, by the time the grid comes there, maybe you might have an opportunity where you can sell energy back to the grid. So that's also another part of money making for you. So you can develop your business model to look at all of these possible eventualities.
Yeah, just to follow up on what you said, basically it is, yes, important, of course, to see if in this area there is, like you said, a factory or a telecommunication company and so on. But it's important to note that, especially for mini grids, it's mostly also a driver for this creation of industries or economic activity. And For example, for our project in Zambia, it's a mini grids and solar home system and pulse systems, and the idea is okay to electrify the communities, the households, but mainly to drive the economic activity there. And not everyone maybe have a stable income, but the idea is to generate those activities for them to have the resources to build those income generating businesses, to have economic wheel turning actually, and therefore it's important to note that as much as yes, energy is allows for existing industries to transition for green transition. It's important to create this those activities.
And yeah, I'm completely agreed. And today, as a mini grid developers, sometimes we are surprised because in the community where we have put the mini grids, there is, for example, a telecom tower, but they don't want to be connected to the grid. So for us, it's also a way. Sometimes we have chosen these villages, say, oh, there is a telecom tower. They will come, maybe they will take maybe 20 or 30% of the mini grids. But at date, no, because why? Because the telecom towers owned to operators. You have a contract with Huawei or another company, and this other company have already his contract with supplying with fuel and so on. And so on our side, we just see the telecom tower but don't benefit from it. And so as a mini grid developer, now we are being pushed by the investor to find a model and so on to create productive use. So it's not we are going and say, who is the productive use? That, okay, there is no productive use, or they don't want to connect. So now how we help this productive use, or how we create this productive use to make the grid profitable. So on our hand, as a mini grid developer, we have to do the other way. And indeed, it's not our own business, the main business at the beginning, but now it has to be our business.
Yeah, that's very interesting. As the prospect of becoming the supplier for those kind of installations. I mean, what do you see as the way forward there? Is that a case of kind of proving out the reliability of the mini grid power for telco towers or other industrials, or is there something actually that those companies want to retain in-house?
I would say maybe there has to be some form of some more collaboration on maybe before, like you said, you saw the telco tower and you thought they might need it. Maybe a bit more collaboration or a bit more investigation to find out, because I would assume, or I would presume that if you bring a mini grid that can provide them with what they need, which is access to energy at an affordable price. So maybe it might be an issue of pricing or an issue of availability, but it's a topic that needs to be discussed. And I think that forums like this give the platform for these kind of topics to be discussed. Maybe, like you said, somebody is managing this part and another person is managing this part. And maybe, you mentioned earlier that the person you're having the discussion with is not actually the person that is making the decisions, right? So it's finding the right people to speak to and finding the right people that make the decisions to have these conversations with and ensure that you are able to find and use those anchor clients.
I actually had a quick question on that. With the kind of potential from expansion when you've installed a mini grid, do you factor that in? So do you typically oversize them for the potential future clients to come in, or is that more just that just won't work from a CapEx perspective?
No, so for us it's very complex. So now it's like we are creating a village. So say, okay, if we want to go in the villages that it works, we need to have at least 2 people for pour la soudure, wiring. And so you have this, you say 4 business of that, 2 business of that, 3 business of that, and that this you say, oh, it will work. So that's how you think as a mini grid developer now. Before it was more what is on site, but now we say, okay, no, now things differently, because everybody needs to go to cut their hair, cut his hair, to have a fridge. And so that's how more we work today to create like a standard grid. And then now also the solution with the technology, you can also quickly increase the number of panel and battery. So you say, okay, you can take the risk. You say, okay, during 3 years, I know that it will be a ramp up, and then I can easily technically follow the demand.
Great. Well, Bemi, I think you set us perfectly up by saying this is a forum where we want to open the discussion. And we've covered a lot of ground. So I'm curious whether there's anyone with a question on anything that we've covered so far. Okay, well, while you gather your questions,
Maybe waiting for the question, there is also something it's not really regulatory, but it's something that we see in all the markets we are in, is that today, you know, everybody has the meters, and now it's like post-paid meters. And the post-paid meters, in all countries, does not allow self-consumption. And that's something that is really annoying for developers or even for clients. Because when you are rejected, like maybe even a few watts to the grid, then it's like you have fraud. Then you have to call the operator, say, sorry, I give you 1 watt. And that's something that is very complex, because then you have to add like the zero net metering, but the zero net metering has more cost. In general, the inverters with the zero net metering are higher cost, and also because these meters, for the free meters, it's not you consume not the same energy on each phases, so it will at the end you will produce just on the lowest phases. So at the end, for the client, it become not beneficial. So we have seen that in a lot of clients, and today it's you know, even the commercial team say, should I sign the client because it's not really phase equilibrated, and then at the end he will not reduce the invoice as much as he want, and that's only because the meters as this issue, I would say, to say, if you send energy to the grid freely, then it's a fraud. So I think that's something that can be improved.
That's interesting, because it's almost kind of modern meters being less compliant for that kind of activity than the old ones that used to just run backwards, right? So it's definitely a bottleneck to address. So do feel free to raise a hand if you've got a question. In the meantime, I've got another for the panel, which is actually, we haven't talked about finance at all, which is great, because often we get these finance panels where we just only talk about finance and none of the kind of practicalities and the reality of making these projects happen. But Paul, you touched on the idea of getting these projects financed and that being, you know, something we just all have to deal with. But how much of an issue is this? I mean, are you generally doing C&I solutions where essentially the company's doing it, you know, meeting the capital cost, or are you seeing more and more financed offers coming through and investors kind of coming alongside the project?
So today on our end, it's more like client arrive to find a solution to pay, I would say cash or in 4 or 5 times, but in 1 year. But today, all the clients we try to finance with like an external financial solution. At the end, the client say, okay, it's too much process. I prefer to do something else. And we have done that with microfinance in Senegal. We have done that in banking in Benin. I mean, it's always the same. And so for us today, we don't have like a good solution. So we during these few days we discuss with few investors that could be maybe propose something more flexible. But as we see as a company is that we see today that we need as a company to take the risk. So this means that on the company balance sheet we pre-finance the client, and then we try to arrive debt, but at the company level. That's how we see, and it's the same for the mini grids. We see that it's the only way today to really develop quickly and not to put the pain on the client, but keep the pain on us. And yes, that's the today.
Very noble. Others, I'm curious how you see the financing picture at the moment.
Yeah, I guess just quickly from me, it's a massive issue. Like as I mentioned earlier, we do innovation projects, so clearly finance is tied in massively with that. So what we try and do, especially through Energy Catalyst and actually also ZGen as well, is we provide an accelerator program alongside that. So that could be everything from linking people together with how to pitch properly, but one of the biggest things is actually trying to find further finance. So we're funded through a larger UK aid-funded program called Transforming Energy Access, and we have partners through that from Acumen, Shell Foundation, IKEA Foundation as well, who are looking at that kind of further finance post-innovation projects. So they're better placed to kind of talk about the issues around finance, but it's definitely something that a lot of the businesses that we support, see as a massive target. Clearly, like they want to form commercially and commercial and viable, sustainable businesses, and you can't do it without finance. You can't survive on grant funding forever, and indeed you shouldn't be if you're forming a sustainable business, a commercially viable business. So we try and really do that, where we line them up. So how can we make innovation projects as attractive as possible for further finance afterwards?
And then, thanks on the innovation side. On the project side, I mean, we certainly see what looks like a very kind of lumpy landscape, as in certain kinds of companies are able to raise financing in certain kinds of projects, whether it's because the industry is highly export-based, so there's a kind of lower credit risk, or whether it's the size of the project. So, for instance, we've seen a huge increase in the solar solutions for the mining sector. Ditto with the telco solarization. I'm curious if you see the same, and if there's particular industries that you think are not getting the attention that they deserve, where there's kind of very strong opportunity.
Like has been said many times here today before this, financing at this point, most businesses don't want to put, most businesses are reluctant to put a lot of capex on the table upfront because of the cost of debt and all of that. So that's why there's a lot of push with financing institutions, and the financing institutions will now finance the installer or finance the CNI people, and then they come to the customer with a proposition that is, the customer doesn't take on a lot of risk on the financing. Maybe they go for energy as a service, or a prepaid metering, or postpaid, or some form of investment that does not require a lot of upfront capital, but they are able to reap the benefits, maybe at a higher cost than maybe what the grid price or what it would cost them if they had done the capex at the beginning. But at least on the long run, they're able to spread this capital.
There it becomes a real partnership again with the investors. Yeah, great, thank you. Well, we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of different themes. So again, yeah, curious for any questions from the floor. I mean, we've gone through policy, bottlenecks, technology, mini grids, and finance. But yeah, I don't see any further questions yet. I'm sure they'll keep coming. I mean, maybe to come back, or maybe if you wanted to jump in. No. Coming back to the innovation side, because one thing that we were having a quick chat about before is kind of the end of life of products and recycling. And I know it's something you've been looking at, James.
Yeah, that's definitely key to what we're doing in ZGen. So the whole aim of ZGen is to be able to effectively replace fossil fuel generators. So that's obviously amazing if we're able to do that. But then what happens to the generator when it's being taken out of commission? And at some point, all products are going to come to the end of their workable life. So how do you get enough value out of that, and also make sure they don't go into landfill? So a big part of ZGen is looking at exactly that, circularity and end-of-life processing as well. So through our partners at the Carbon Trust, we've funded a ZGen Circularity Challenge. So there's a project actually which is launching in a couple of weeks, which is looking at turning components from old, disused diesel and petrol generators into solar cooling systems. So then, trying to get value from something which potentially would have just ended up in landfill. But it also goes a bit bigger than that. So not just thinking about if you're replacing something, what do you do with it? But also, what do you do with the innovation when it comes to the end of the life? As you can imagine, a lot of the systems that we're looking at, they're going to involve solar, they're going to involve batteries. Some of them are looking at second life batteries as well. And we don't want to get into a situation where, a lot of sub-Saharan Africa is getting lower quality systems and in effect are just being kind of dumped in the regions. So how do you get the biggest amount of value out of systems where, first of all, that doesn't happen? But equally, how do you increase the longevity? So some of you might have seen Hinkley here, who definitely look at e-waste recycling, and that we're supporting through ZGen as well. And they're looking at exactly that, getting the maximum amount of life out of batteries and solar systems. Either putting them back into circulation if they do have life still in them, and using them in different applications where you don't potentially need the entire capacity of a battery. Or actually taking them apart and trying to get value from all the individual components as part of that. But I think this is a really key thing for all innovations, and businesses in general is taking responsibility for your products that you put out in the world. Potentially not just being, it's in the client's hands and how they deal with it, they deal with the disposal, but taking that on yourself as a business. And if we can show that there's value in doing that, by saying, there's still value in your product, even if your customer's done with it, then that's a real benefit. You kind of get a secondary market then from all of the installations and that sort of stuff. So I really see that as a very like a key area, definitely.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear of solutions coming through, and indeed circular economy, both prompting some of these projects. I mean, in terms of the mandates for the companies themselves, but then also potentially impacting the economics, right? Both on the industrial side and the mini grid side. So I hope to see more of that coming through. Great. Well, I'm going to put out to the floor again in case we've had any inspiration, and if not, I think we're going to close quite soon. So I would invite the panel. Thank you so much for all of these insights. And maybe I can just ask you to close with kind of your, your ultimate kernel of truth for the expansion of these solutions in the industrial sector. Where do you see it going? What are you excited about?
Yeah, sure. So just to wrap up about the different elements discussed. So it's really interconnected to look at the different elements all together, the work on the policies and regulations, and also because, for example, in some frameworks where it's complicated in the regulations, funds tend to be more risk averse in those countries or those areas, etc. So it's all interconnected. For example, in the case of talking about the mini grid, for instance, or something. So here, it's important to really note the importance of DRE and green transition, and of the contribution of the different stakeholders, different actors of the ecosystem. And because it's beneficial for the creation of the new economic activities in different areas, but it's also for existing industries in terms of cost saving, enabling more sustainability, of course, more responsible, I would say, consumption, etc. For the end consumers of those industries also as well, but also for existing industries for their supply chain, because it helps decreasing any uncertainty and risk in the supply chain, because it's very important for to decrease price fluctuations, and therefore it supports the profitability of those industries. So looking at it from all the different actors, it is of a huge importance to actually talk about this and move towards actions for the green transition eventually. Yeah.
I don't mind going next. So for me, kind of looking forward, I think Specifically, energy storage is looking really cool. There's a lot of, like, a bit of an energy storage nerd in terms of my background, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the battery space in terms of new materials, which is hopefully bring the cost down and drive up, longevity and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking, sodium ion, potentially flow batteries as well for different systems, but then also non-battery based storage technologies as well. So storage as heat, flywheels, that type of stuff, where there's real opportunities here looking beyond batteries. But even in that space, I mentioned circularity, second life batteries, again, reducing the cost. So it's such a huge expense when it comes to, installing a DRE system. So I'm really excited in that space. And I think as well, like going back to the point I made earlier about skills and O&M, that's really being recognized as a potential issue, and people are starting to do things about it, which is really great to see, and it's very exciting.
But on our end, we like pain, so we see the future good. Now, I think it's more for what we wanted for the future is more that we can work more with different actors, the productive use, the financing, that the financing do the financing, the productive use, they ask for the energy like this, because today the issue on our side is more that as an energy provider, we become a bank, we become a productive use solution and so on. It's very complex as a company. So what we want with the future is more to work with more of the companies to stay on our field, is mean energy distribution, but then work with the bank who will do their job and also the productive use of their job. So more synergy between companies.
And you just took my words out of my mouth. What I would just say is more collaboration between the industries and the mini grid operators or the mini grid installers, and because the benefits are on both sides, right? The installer is going to get a lot of benefits and the industries to get a lot of benefits. So there should be more collaboration and more ways to ensure that there's synergy between both parties.
Great, thank you. Well, we've got such a long way to go for decarbonization, as well as industrial growth, and then, of course, energy access. So it's great that DRE solutions can play such a strong role. Please join me in thanking the panel for all of their insights. It's been great.